The morning sun peeked through the gray Nairobi sky as people bustled past each other in tailored suits and polished shoes. Among the crowd was a woman whose presence no one noticed, not because she was invisible, but because people chose not to see her. She wore an oversized hoodie, one sleeve slightly torn. Her jeans were faded, and her sneakers looked worn. She had no makeup, no jewelry, no designer bag. To the world, she looked like someone who didn't belong. But behind those tired eyes was a story that would turn the entire banking industry on its head. Her name was Keisha Mbeki. She walked into Zenith Grand Bank, a towering building of glass and steel, with confidence that didn't match her appearance. She paused briefly at the marble-floored lobby. No one greeted her. No one offered assistance. The receptionist, a young woman named Nancy, glanced at her and instantly made a judgment. "Excuse me," Keisha said gently, walking up to the desk. "I need to speak with the branch manager. It's about a serious matter." Nancy narrowed her eyes. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but..." "Then I'm afraid the manager is unavailable. We don't accept walk-ins." Nancy cut her off sharply. "Especially from people like you." Keisha tilted her head. "People like me?" Nancy smiled sarcastically. "People who look like they came here for a donation." There was a brief pause. Keisha looked down, then looked up again, her voice steady. "I'm giving you one chance to reconsider how you're treating me." Nancy let out a small laugh. "Guards," she called. Within seconds, 2 security officers arrived. One of them, Officer Chacha, recognized Keisha, or at least he thought he did. "You again?" he grunted. "Didn't we throw you out last month?" "I've never been here before," Keisha replied, not flinching. "Right. And I'm the president," he said, grabbing her arm. "Let's go. Don't waste our time." She tried to pull away. "You're making a mistake." That's when it happened. A loud slap echoed through the bank lobby. Chacha had struck her across the face. Gasps rose from a few customers nearby, but most kept silent, too busy, too blind, too comfortable. Keisha touched her cheek slowly and looked at him, not with fear, not with anger, but with something far more dangerous, composure. "I see," she said softly. "This is how your bank treats people who don't look wealthy." "You're lucky we're not calling the police," Nancy snapped. But Keisha smiled. "Oh, don't worry. They're already on the way." Unaware of her meaning, Nancy picked up the phone and actually called the police. Within 10 minutes, Keisha was in handcuffs, being led out by 2 confused officers. Cameras flashed. Phones recorded. She remained quiet. But as she was escorted to the police vehicle, she turned back once and looked straight at the building. She didn't speak loud. But one guard heard her whisper, "This is the bank I built with my own hands." The sun was barely up the next morning when the headlines hit the news. An identified woman arrested at Zenith Grand Bank allegedly caused a scene. Video shows security slapping woman at bank, sparks online outrage. The footage had gone viral overnight. Thousands of comments poured in, some defending the staff, others demanding justice for the woman in the hoodie. But no one knew the full story, except her. Keisha Mbeki sat quietly at her private residence in Karen, sipping her morning tea as her assistant. Lorna scrolled through the trending hashtags. "Madam," Lorna said softly, "you're trending on Twitter, and not in the way people think." Keisha smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That's good. Let them speculate. Sometimes the storm must come before the calm." She picked up her phone and made one call to the Zenith Grand Board of Directors. In less than 10 minutes, an emergency meeting was set. No questions asked. No one dared delay the woman who built the empire from nothing. 15 years ago, Keisha was a nobody, an orphan, a street vendor. She sold peanuts on buses and polished shoes after school. She hustled, studied at night, earned scholarships, and finally made it to Harvard, her dream, to build a bank where everyone was treated with dignity, no matter how they looked or dressed. And now, that dream had been violated by the very people she trusted to run it. Hours later, inside the Zenith Grand Bank boardroom, tension filled the air. The directors, mostly men in sleek suits, whispered among themselves until the door swung open. Keisha walked in wearing a navy blue power suit, her natural hair styled into a sleek crown. There was no hoodie this time, no sneakers, just the commanding aura of a woman on a mission. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said, her voice calm. They all stood. "Madam CEO," the chairman stammered. "We heard what happened yesterday." "The news?" "I didn't come here to talk about the news," she interrupted. "I came here to talk about the culture in our bank, about how a receptionist, a guard, and others see poor-looking customers as trash. about how I, dressed in a hoodie, was slapped and arrested outside a bank I own. The room fell completely silent. Some tried to speak. She raised a hand. I've seen enough. I've experienced it firsthand. And now action must follow. Meanwhile, back at the same branch, chaos had erupted. Officer Chacha and Nancy, the receptionist, had arrived to work, laughing about the previous day's drama, completely unaware of the storm headed their way. But their laughter didn't last. A black luxury SUV pulled up to the branch entrance. Out stepped Keisha, this time flanked by her personal legal team, the bank's HR director, and a television crew. Nancy's mouth dropped. Chacha froze. What's going on? Nancy asked. Keisha didn't answer right away. She walked past them straight to the center of the bank lobby. Then she turned around and said loudly, My name is Keisha Mbeki. I am the CEO and majority owner of Zenith Grand Bank. And yesterday I was arrested, slapped, and humiliated right here by my own staff. The entire bank went still. You judged me by my clothes. You saw dirt instead of dignity. You saw poverty instead of power. And today, justice begins. The air inside Zenith Grand Bank was so still it could crack glass. Customers had stopped talking. Employees were frozen behind their desks. Phones had stopped ringing. It was as if the entire building itself knew judgment had arrived. Keisha Mbeki stood at the center of the bank lobby, flanked by her legal team and news cameras, her voice calm but full of authority. I am not here to embarrass anyone, she continued. I'm here to remind you, every single employee, that this bank was not built by suits and silk. It was built by sweat, struggle, and service. She turned toward the front desk. Nancy, she said. The receptionist jumped, her face pale. You judged me the moment I walked in yesterday, not because I was loud or aggressive, but because I didn't look wealthy enough to deserve your respect. Nancy stammered. Ma'am, I didn't know. You didn't care to know. Keisha replied gently. And that's worse. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Then she faced Officer Chacha. You put your hands on a woman you didn't recognize. You slapped her in front of witnesses. And you enjoyed it. Chacha looked down. His lips trembled. It was a mistake. I didn't know you were. No. You knew I was human, but you didn't care. That's the real issue. She turned slightly, addressing the entire building. I once sat on the side of the street and watched people walk past me like I was nothing. I told myself if I ever had power, I'd use it to make sure no one else felt invisible again. That's why I built Zenith Grand Bank. Not to be the biggest, not to be the richest, but to be the fairest. She raised her hand. One of her lawyers stepped forward and handed her a folder. These are immediate termination letters, Keisha announced. For Officer Chacha and Nancy Okoro. Gasps echoed. Nancy fell into a chair. Chacha's knees buckled. You are both fired, effective immediately, she said. But your punishment isn't just the job you lost. It's the lesson you refused to learn. 2 HR officers escorted the stunned pair out while the cameras kept rolling. Keisha didn't stop there. To the rest of the staff. This is your wake-up call. From today onward, there will be retraining across all Zenith Grand branches. Every single employee will undergo empathy and dignity workshops. Promotions will no longer be based on appearance, background, or personal friendships, but on performance and respect for others. The crowd began clapping, first quietly, then louder. Some staff wiped tears from their eyes. A young teller walked up and whispered, Thank you. You've just changed everything. Outside the bank, a sea of reporters waited. As Keisha stepped out, dozens of cameras turned her way. One reporter shouted, Miss Mbeki, why did you go undercover? Keisha paused. Because sometimes you have to see the truth for yourself, she said. And sometimes the only way to fix a broken system is to become the mirror that reflects it. She got into her car, closed the door, and drove off. Not to rest, but to continue what she started. This was just one branch. But the message? It had reached the world. The day after the public firings, Zenith Grand Bank was buzzing. Staff were alert, customers were curious, and managers were walking on eggshells. Every whisper carried Keisha Mbeki's name. What she did had never been done before, not by any CEO, and certainly not in full public view. But the biggest surprise hadn't happened yet. Around 10 a.m., while cameras were still outside and staff were nervously checking emails about the new customer dignity policy, an elderly woman entered the bank. Her name was Mama Atino. She wore a faded wrapper, rubber slippers, and carried a blue plastic bag that had seen better days. Her back was slightly hunched, and her hands trembled as she held her walking stick. She was barely noticed, just another old woman coming to check her savings. But today was different. She stood quietly at the entrance, her eyes scanning the branch. A young teller named Brian noticed her. He walked over gently. "Mama, can I help you?" She smiled warmly. "Yes, son. I'm here to speak with Miss Keisha." Brian blinked. "Madam Keisha, the CEO." Mama Atieno nodded. "Yes, please tell her Mama Atieno is here. She'll know." Unsure what to do, Brian whispered to a supervisor who whispered to another, and within minutes a call was made. Keisha was at another branch across town. When she heard the name Mama Atieno, she dropped everything. "Hold her there," she told them. "Don't let her leave. I'm coming right now." 35 minutes later, Keisha walked in. No cameras, no press, no power suit. Just Keisha, real, human. As soon as she saw Mama Atieno, her eyes filled with emotion. "Mama," she whispered, rushing forward. The staff stared in stunned silence as the CEO dropped to her knees and hugged the old woman's waist. "My daughter," Mama Atieno smiled, patting her head. "I saw the news. I came to see you with my own eyes. I had to." Keisha helped her sit. Then she turned to the staff. "I want everyone to know," she said, "this woman, this simple, quiet woman, once fed me for 6 months when I was homeless. When I was sleeping behind kiosks and bus stops, she used to bring me boiled maize and tea. Not because she had much, but because she had love." Gasps and murmurs filled the air. "She didn't ask who I was. She didn't care how dirty I looked. She gave me what the world refused me, dignity." Tears rolled down Keisha's cheeks. "She taught me that dignity isn't about money or appearance. It's about how we treat the weakest among us. And when I built this bank, it was her values I wanted to embed. Not corporate greed, not ego, not gatekeeping." Mama Atieno gently held her hand. "Daughter," she said softly, "you've made me proud, but don't stop. There are still more hearts to soften. More people like you once were, waiting for one kind act to save them." Keisha nodded. In that moment, the entire branch understood something deep. Leadership wasn't about control. It was about compassion, about serving, not ruling. The young teller Brian stepped forward. "Madam CEO, I think it's time we rename this branch." Keisha looked at him, curious. "To what?" He smiled. "The Mama Atieno branch. In honor of the dignity we forgot and the heart we found again." That day, everything changed. Not just policies, not just signs, but people. In the days following Keisha Mbeki's viral confrontation and the emotional reunion with Mama Atieno, something incredible began to happen. Across Kenya, whispers turned to conversations. Conversations turned to movements. People began walking into Zenith Grand Bank branches dressed just as they were. Farmers in gumboots, school teachers in faded dresses, hawkers with calved hands. And this time, no one turned them away, because Keisha had launched Project Open Door, a new bank-wide campaign that guaranteed equal treatment for every customer, regardless of background, appearance, or account balance. Her face and message were on every poster, billboard, and bus stop. But not everyone celebrated her reforms. Inside the sleek boardroom of a high-rise office in Nairobi's financial district, a group of cold eyes stared at a large screen showing clips of Keisha's speech at the Mama Atieno branch. "She's going too far," muttered one of the men. "She's making the rest of us look bad." His name was Douglas Caro, CEO of a rival bank, Capital Crown Finance. For years, he and others like him had thrived in a system where wealth meant access and appearance meant everything. A woman beside him nodded. "If this continues, clients will leave our banks for hers. She's made kindness profitable, and that's dangerous." Their plan? Smear her name. The very next day, a news blog posted a story titled, "Is Keisha Mbeki's sympathy act just a PR stunt?" Photos of her in luxury cars, attending high-end galas, and wearing expensive brands were splashed across the screen. An attempt to paint her as a hypocrite. The article went viral. People started questioning. How can she claim to be one of us if she drives a Range Rover? Is this really about justice or just attention? She's rich now. Of course, she can act generous. Keisha saw it all, and for a brief moment it stung. But then she smiled. She knew what they feared. Not her past, not her wealth, but the fact that she was giving power back to the people. She called for a live national press conference the next day, When the cameras started rolling, she stood in front of the same branch where she was once slapped and arrested, wearing the same faded hoodie from that day. "I've seen the posts, the questions," she began. "And yes, I live in a nice house now. I drive a good car, but I earned it." She looked directly into the lens. "I was poor, not because I was lazy, but because the world was blind. I got up early, worked late, studied harder than anyone I knew. But even now, I am judged by the very same system I'm trying to fix." She took a deep breath. "If you think kindness is weakness, you've misunderstood power. If you think standing for the voiceless makes me soft, then you've never seen a real lioness protecting her pride." The reporters fell silent, and then the applause began, not from the cameras, but from the people standing behind her. Street vendors, elderly men, mothers with children, even employees from rival banks had come to hear her speak. That day, her message was no longer about just one bank. It was about an entire nation. The nation was watching. Ever since Keisha Mbekis's speech in front of the Zenith Grand branch went viral, the airwaves had been filled with debates, praises, and criticism. Social media buzzed. Hashtags trended. Her name was now etched into the soul of every discussion on leadership, equity, and what it meant to truly serve the people. But while the public rallied behind her, a darker conversation was happening in secret. Within the high walls of Zenith Grand's executive tower, the board was divided. Some praised her courage. Others, especially the older directors who'd grown rich in silence, were growing uncomfortable. "She's changing the culture too quickly," murmured board member Collins Indiritu. "The customers love her, but what about our top investors? She's costing us partnerships," added another. "Two foreign banks have already delayed negotiations. They say she's too revolutionary." The room quieted when Thomas Odhiambo, Keisha's trusted chief financial officer, entered. He'd been with her since her early days, her classmate at university, the one who helped draft the business plan for Zenith Grand. Calm, meticulous, and polished. But today, something in his eyes had shifted. He cleared his throat. "I've had lunch with the regional investment group. They're nervous. They want to see more stability, less media heat." "And?" asked a board member. "They suggested," Thomas said carefully, "that perhaps it's time Keisha stepped back, or at least take a leave." A heavy silence filled the room. The idea was unthinkable. Keisha wasn't just the face of Zenith Grand. She was its foundation. But now, even her own inner circle had begun to question the very fire that built their empire. Later that evening, in her private office on the 17th floor, Keisha stared out the window. The Nairobi skyline blinked back at her, full of life, movement, and unseen danger. Lorna, her assistant, entered quietly. "They started turning on you," she said softly. Keisha didn't turn. "I know." Even Thomas. This time Keisha did turn. Her eyes were tired, not from the fight, but from the weight of betrayal. "I trusted him," she said. "He was there when I had nothing but an idea and a backpack full of rejection letters." Lorna looked hesitant. "He's been meeting with Douglas Caro." Keisha's jaw tightened. Douglas, the rival bank CEO who'd called her a PR stunt. The man who thrived in elitism and exclusion. The man who feared her kindness more than any competition. So Thomas had joined him. Keisha took a slow breath. "Then it's time we separate the roots from the weeds." The next morning she called a closed-door meeting with the board. No cameras. No press. She walked in wearing a simple navy dress. No makeup. No flash. Just resolve. "Thomas," she began, her voice steady. "You've been with me from the beginning, so I'll speak to you with honesty. Is it true you've been meeting with Douglas Caro?" Thomas hesitated. "I spoke with him about possible partnerships. That's all." "And did you tell him we were considering selling a portion of Zenith Grand's stake to foreign entities?" The room shifted uncomfortably. Thomas didn't answer. Keisha pulled out a printed email. "Then how did he get this copy of our internal investment proposal? Dated and timestamped. Sent from your office computer." The board gasped. Thomas's face paled. "You went through my—" "No," she said, raising the paper. "Its security flagged it. You broke protocol." "I was doing what was best for the company," he snapped. "You're turning it into a charity. You're ruining the brand." Keisha stepped forward, her voice rising, not in anger, but in strength. "No, Thomas. I'm saving the brand. You want prestige over people. You want numbers over names. But I remember when we built this bank with borrowed furniture and handwritten letters. We promised to do things differently." She turned to the rest of the board. "Let this be clear. Betrayal disguised as advice is still betrayal. And any leader who puts profit over people will never carry this brand forward. Keisha took a deep breath, her heart racing. As of today, Thomas of the Ambo is relieved of all duties pending full investigation. He's no longer welcome on this board. The room was dead silent. Thomas stood, trying to speak, but words failed. He looked at Keisha with eyes that once held loyalty, now filled with regret. As he left the room, Keisha turned back to the others. If you're here for wealth without purpose or power without principle, this is your moment to leave. Because I'd rather rebuild from scratch with people who believe than leave an empire of cowards. One by one, hands slowly clapped. Not all, but enough to know she wasn't alone. Outside, as she stepped out of the building, dozens of customers had gathered with handmade signs. We believe in you, Keisha. Kindness is strength. The people's CEO. A small girl ran up to her and hugged her leg. Her mother watched carefully from a distance. Are you the lady who owns the bank? The girl asked. Keisha knelt down smiling. Yes, baby, I am. Will I be able to open an account one day, even if I have no money? Keisha touched her cheek gently. Sweetheart, you already have value. Money just comes later. The crowd applauded. Cameras clicked. But Keisha wasn't posing. She was promising. It had been 3 weeks since the world watched Keisha Mbeki fire her own CFO on live TV. 3 weeks since the nation saw a CEO kneel before an old woman who once gave her maize and tea. And 3 weeks since a woman in a hoodie reminded a country what real leadership looked like. But Keisha wasn't finished. The reforms across Zenith Grand Bank had begun rolling out in full force. Every staff member, from janitor to executive, was now required to attend training sessions on empathy, active listening, and human-first service. Branches began setting up open-hour desks where anyone, rich or poor, could walk in, speak their mind, and be heard. But with all eyes on Zenith Grand, Keisha knew her vision had to go further than policy. She wanted transformation. It was a cool Friday morning when she entered the National Banking Summit in Nairobi, dressed in a bright chiton suit that honored her grandmother's tribe. The room was filled with stiff suits, hard faces, and polished pride. CEOs, investors, foreign dignitaries. They had come expecting a corporate talk. What they got was a revolution. Keisha took the stage slowly. Cameras flashed. Journalists stood still. The entire room leaned in. She began softly. When I was 15, I'd opened my first bank account. It took 3 months. 3 months to convince someone that a girl selling peanuts was worthy of being seen. I still remember the man behind the desk. He looked at me and said, "This is a bank, not a donation center." I'd never forgot those words. Silence, she continued. Years later, I built a bank. Not to compete, not to dominate, but to rewrite what banking means. We've turned away too many people for looking poor, for dressing wrong, for speaking less polished. Then her voice sharpened. But a customer is not a balance. A woman in slippers might own land. A man in overalls might run a farm that feeds 400 families. A child with no shoes might invent something that saves lives. A ripple of emotion moved through the room. I didn't build Zenith Grand to be a bank. I built it to be a bridge. She paused and looked out at the crowd. And today I'm turning that bridge into a highway. She turned to the projector screen behind her. This is the Dignity Fund. The screen displayed a new initiative, a 5 billion shilling fund designed to provide interest-free microloans, zero-fee business mentorship, and financial literacy classes for low-income Kenyans across the country. No credit history required. No collateral, just a dream and a plan. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Many applauded. Others, especially the stiff-suited CEOs, looked horrified. Every major branch will host Dignity Saturdays, where anyone from any background can come in, speak to an advisor, and receive real help. Because a nation grows not from the top down, but from the ground up. When she finished, half the room stood to applaud. The rest remained seated, their silence louder than applause. After the summit, Keisha stepped outside where a swarm of journalists awaited her. "Miss Mbeki," one shouted, "won't this crash your profit margin?" Keisha smiled. "I built this bank once with nothing but faith and paper, and it became one of the largest in East Africa. If helping people is a loss, then I'm proud to lose." Another asked, "And what about your critics? Those who say you're too emotional to lead?" She replied, "If empathy is a flaw, then let it be written on my tombstone." But what came next was the real shock. That evening, in a private meeting with the board, Keisha announced her resignation. I'm stepping down as CEO, she said, to stunned silence. Not because I'm tired, but because I've planted enough seeds. And now I want to help others do the same. Not just in this bank, but across Africa. She paused. I will remain as chairwoman and founder. But the day-to-day? I'm handing that over to someone who came from the same soil I did. And with that, she introduced the new CEO, Brian Kama, the young bank teller who had first helped Mama Etino on the day of the incident. He stepped forward, eyes wide, lips trembling. I don't have the suits, he stammered. Keisha smiled. But you have the heart, the vision, and the fire. The board rose in applause. Some clapped slowly, some reluctantly, but all recognized the truth. Keisha was more than a CEO. She was a movement. Weeks passed, and slowly banks across the region began copying her model. Other institutions launched their own dignity programs. A woman who was once mistaken for a beggar in a hoodie had changed the face of African finance forever. Years later, a little girl, barefoot, bright-eyed, stood in front of a bank branch in Kisumu, looking up at the sign above the door. Bakisha Mbeki Center for Financial Freedom. She asked her mother, "Who is that lady?" Her mother smiled. She's the woman who reminded the world that everyone deserves to be seen.